Hello friends, in this video we will be covering an introduction to Azure Machine Learning. We will be using Azure ML SDK to and using a Jupyter notebook to create a workspace in which you can carry out Azure ML experiment. The first thing you need to do is you should have a subscription of Microsoft Azure. If you don't have it, you can sign it up. You can get free access. So for 1 year. So on if you so you visit the portal .azure.com. Once you sign it up, uh, you will have a subscription key. The key would be needed for you to connect through notebooks and to create the resources. So all the resources which are there in the Microsoft Azure, you can access through this page. Now you need to have Anaconda installed and Jupyter Notebook. You should also have the Azure ML SDK. So, uh, so you sign up into Azure portal to get started. You need to create a machine learning resource. Now, when you are creating a machine learning a resource during your subscription, you need to choose the enterprise. If you choose your enterprise, only then you will have access to the Azure Machine Learning Designer and Auto ML. Okay, so if you look in this notebook, I have just taken a view of how logically things are arranged. So you have a subscription. You everything thing that you work is under resource group, and whatever experiment you do, whatever work you do for your building your machine learning models, uh, which includes getting your data, your notebooks, where you will going to run your notebooks on a compute, uh, the pipelines and the models itself. So all these will be in a particular workspace. Now when you create a workspace, by default you will also be creating a storage account with it, application insights, key vaults, and virtual machine and a container registry. Okay, so you if you okay, so you need to install using your pip Azure ML SDK to follow along with this notebook. Now, storage account is a place where you can upload and store your data files. Application Insights gives you monitoring information. Key Vault is the place where you can store your keys. Okay, and once you have your experiment, you need to run it. Before you run it on a compute target, you need to provision it. In this exercise we will be just developing it on a local machine. So in this case it's laptop. So we will just training the model in the laptop, or we will be creating all this locally. Okay, so in the cloud it will be deployed once we reach that stage. But in this session of the video, it's all about creating workspace and getting you introduced. Okay, so how do you create a workspace? So from the in this cell of Jupyter, you see, so you the Azure ML SDK has exhaustive APIs. The first thing you need to import a workspace. Now, once you have the workspace class, you can call this create method. You give your subscription key. You give your resource name. You give your workspace name, and you give your location where this workspace is going to be created. And this is the type of subscription you have. As I mentioned, if you have enterprise, you will can see it through you can use the designer and the AutoML part. Okay, so without much ado, let's get this kicked off. So this takes some time, so I will just uh, give a pause. Before that, we'll just go to one more site. So portal.azure gives all the resources of the Azure that you have. And now for a machine learning specific, you have ml.azure.com. Now if you see here, uh, this is the site. So I have a free trial. Now you see there is no machine learning workspace here. So once you have created a machine learning workspace, only then you will be able to use this. Okay, So let's wait for our workspace to be created. If you go on and do a filtering here, after some time it should come. Okay, so for now let me just take a pause. uh, it takes a few seconds. See, it is deploying the app insights, it is deploying the key vault, the storage accounts. So few of the default things that comes with the when you create a workspace. So these things, storage account, app insight, key vault, virtual machines, all these are created when you create a workspace. Okay, so just pause a second here. Okay, let's come back. Okay, now you see that action of creating a workspace is executed, it's completed using our notebook. So it's deployed the workspace. So let's check there in the portal under the all resources. You should see it. Just do a refresh. Sure. So you have the workspace. In addition to the workspace, you can also see there's an app inside, there's a key vault and a storage account which is created by default for you. Now you once your workspace is created, you can go on and create access it through a UI, also through this portal ml.azure.com. Now let's do a refresh here. Okay, and till the time it is getting loaded. So we have created a workspace. Now programmatically you can also get the workspace. So there are different methods where you need to go through the API documentation to leverage more of it. So in this case we will just check that okay, the workspace that we created, we will just get a reference out of it. Okay, so yeah, let's see, yeah, the page is refreshed. Go to returning. Okay, now you see this is active and it is showing me that I have a workspace and a resource group. So let me get a reference out of it also. Okay, because you see a error because you see the resource group I mentioned is a different one. So let's run it again. So it's very simple. You just use the get, you give the name, you give a subscription ID and resource group. So that gives you a reference of your workspace that you created. Okay, you can using that reference you can get your compute target, you can get your data store. Now so once you, okay, let me go to the US to the UI, show you the UI also. So once, so you can do both through UI and through SDK. Now let us try to run a experiment here. Now what is an experiment? So experiment is your modeling code, whatever code you want to write, machine learning code that you can and put, and those are grouped and they're called experiments and they always belong to the workspace. So you can do that through the UI. You see it welcomes to the UI tells you that it's welcome to the studio. You can register your data, you can use some built-in machine learning models which I have, you can evaluate models and you can deploy the models. Okay, now only if you have enterprise subscription, when you choose the portal, you these AutoML and designer will be enabled for you. Now if you want to create an experiment, so you can just start with by creating a, see, go to experiment. You don't have any experiments here, so you go to a new and you start with a, this is a pipeline. Okay, so whatever pipeline you create, once you run it, those will be under experiment. Now by, so designer when UI will come up, which you can use. It's a drag and drop interface. Once you have your experiment in place, the flow, that is, you read the data, do the modeling, predict, then to run it you need to specify a compute target, you need to provision the machine. But we're not covering this in this session. Let's go back to our SDK. So as I showed you, once you have a code, you need to also specify where you want to run it. In our case here, we will be running it locally. Okay. Uh, so let's go to the script here. Now to run it, you need to run a code. You need a run configuration and something called a script configuration. Now both of them are needed. So run configuration basically tells what is the environment you have and are you going to manage it yourself. So for local PC run, you need to mention that it's a user managed. Okay, so you import the run configuration, initialize, instantiate that run configuration, and you just mention that the user managed dependencies. In our case it's Python here, so the Python environment that we'll use, it's our it's user managed. Okay, so and then we are creating one experiment, we just giving it the name Azure ML 26. You specify the workspace. Yeah, so and then when you want to run that experiment, to run it you want to have your code, where what code you want to run through the experiment. So that code you need to pass on through a script configuration. So wherever so we have the code in it says this is a code, a Python one code. Then in the script run config, you need to pass where your code is. You need to specify what run configuration is going to use. Now once that is done, you start your experiment. You just call the start logging method. Okay, and then you do a experiment.submit by passing the script run config object. And once your run log is complete, you should be able to see it in the UI also. So let's quickly do that. So just to recap, to suppose you have a piece of code, to run that piece of code through a SDK in Azure ML, you need two things. You need a run config, you need a script config. Run config is primarily it is your encapsulation of your or what packages you need, those things. So in here you are using run config. We are running the experiment locally. So we have mentioned that it's a user managed dependencies of Python is true, and the script config we specify where our code is, and then you instantiate an experiment object where you pass the workspace, and then you kick off the experiment logging, and then you run that experiment through experiment.submit, wherein you pass the configuration. Here we have passed the script run config. Now if you see the run is complete, it has provided an execution summary. So let's see if the same anything is visible here through this portal. You see the experiment Azure ML local Feb 26 has been completed. So if you want to look at the run metrics of this experiment to the UI, you can have a look. Okay, so this is the experiment we ran, and so these are the details. So it was a prediction where I just logged in accuracy. So those things you can and see. You can view the outputs and the logs here. Okay, so this is how from the UI. Let's check what you can get from the uh, SDK. Okay, so you see this whole bunch of information that is printed out here, and this is a piece of code that was run. Okay, that way, and then once you are done, you can delete your workspace. Okay, so delete that. It's because if it is charged, so once you are done with your work, you it's better practice to get your workspace deleted. Okay, thank you then. So keep trying, keep exploring, and keep learning. I'll be posting more videos on the topic. Okay, uh, thank you then.